Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. Chief Isaac, City Manager Paul Boggs-Muthing, Zach Kessler, who's a lawyer that the city pays for that works out of the U.S. Attorney's Office. U.S. Attorney de Villiers was unable to be here, but he was happy that Zach could stand with us today to brag about some of the work that we're doing together. I'm going to talk about Today we're going to talk about a couple different issues. But the meat of what we're talking about today is helping reduce gun violence and crime in this city. And the chief's going to talk the most about that. The city manager will talk about that in relationship to our partnership with the U.S. Attorney's Office. But there are a few other topics I want to mention as well that will help set the stage for this. First, as many of you know, I was asked to serve by the U.S. Conference of Mayors, along with two other mayors, the mayor of Chicago and Tampa, as well as several police chiefs around the country, on a recommendation of police reform. And, of course, Cincinnati has led reform for 20 years since the collaborative agreement. And we published this report that you all have access to. It's a public document. We can get it to you a couple weeks ago. And I'll be honest with you, in my opinion, and I was a co-author of the report, a lot of what's in here is reflected in our collaborative agreement. And we weren't the only source material for the recommendations, but we are widely believed across the country, which is why I was selected in the first place to represent Cincinnati's wonderful history. Nonetheless, it's been 19 years, and there are a lot of topics in here. And, of course, we are, as a department, committed to continuous reform. And so I am introducing this report to City Council to ask for their support, but also to formally request that our police department be given an opportunity to review the document, all of its recommendations, and to say, we do this already, we do that already, that's an interesting idea, here's how we would do that here. And, take a couple months, but to get us back a formal written response to this report. And I say that because I think, given the context of the national environment, it's important to say that there is nothing inconsistent with police reform and wanting more police to reduce gun violence. These are difficult times we're living in this country right now. And we have real race tensions, and we have really too much gun violence in this country. And we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. And I believe the Cincinnati Police Department is better positioned than any department in the country to walk and chew gum at the same time, given its history of reforms and its embedded culture that has taken root over the last 20 years. So that's, I think, an important beginning discussion point. But we're standing here, obviously, because this was the site of a mass shooting a couple weeks ago. And the levels of gun violence we're seeing across the country and here are unacceptable. And as we talked about a lot this week, we are facing the unprecedented headwinds economically of the recession and tax revenues drying up, of the pandemic. And so these are not easy things to tackle. But whenever we can, we want to do more to reduce gun violence by supporting our police with more resources, to have more presence, more officers in hotspot areas like Grant Park to deter crime and to build relationships with the community. In addition, and I'm just going to summarize it and let the chief get to the meat of it and the city solicitor get to the U.S. attorney piece, to work with the community but also work with federal prosecutors to bring illegal gun charges that lead to longer prison sentences in federal prison. And we have a wonderful long history with Ken Parker and Zach from our office, and we're going to do more of that in the next couple of weeks. And the comprehensive approach that's called for in the collaborative, the chief is going to talk about with some exciting new efforts on outreach and organizing with the community. But we are also submitting today a report about the financial situation of the city And we did receive another $7.7 million last week from the state of Ohio. And I'm proud to say that we are paying off our loan that we took out to balance the budget. So, which was a unique historical fact that we'd never done before. And I'm proud to say that within 60 days, we are going to be paying it back. In addition, we will be able to squeeze out $1 million in our recommendation to City Council to enhance police presence, the partnerships that I described. And with that, I'd ask Chief Isaac to come forward and describe his recommendations on how we would use this additional $1 million to reduce crime in the city. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's very fitting as we continue to talk about the expansion of our efforts to combat the rise that we've seen in gun violence in our city here at this location in Grant Park. This beautiful park will now be remembered as the location of one of the largest mass shootings in the history of our city. Right where we are this afternoon, 2 individuals shot and killed each other, and 7 other individuals were struck by gunfire in the crossfire. If it hadn't been for the heroic actions of our officers, the Cincinnati Fire Department, the staff at University and Christ hospitals, it's very possible that more of those victims would have perished from their injuries. No community should have to endure this level of violence. As the mayor touched on, it is our intent, with all the resources that we have to bear, that we will arrest and charge this small group of people who inflict violence on our neighborhoods. I believe that this additional assignment of a prosecutor to the U.S. Attorney's Office to bring federal charges on those individuals that are caught with illegal guns or who engage in gun violence is a strong move in that effort. And I thank you, Mayor, for making that possible. We also know that this cannot be a law enforcement only effort. We have to have the aid of all of our partners. I have asked the mayor and the city manager to allocate funding to form a group of community safety organizers. We know that our citizens want to help and they desire to be involved in changing what's taking place in our city. It's my hope and vision that these safety organizers will help our most troubled neighborhoods. They will be able to help in forming problem-solving teams. They'll be able to help mobilize residents and business owners to participate in safety activities through community organizing and be able to coordinate other safety events and activities. The overall goal of this is to improve the safety and quality of life in our neighborhoods. And secondly, they will be able to act as an additional resource for our residents, our community-based organizations, business owners, and with law enforcement. This is in its infancy. We will have more coming on this in the upcoming weeks as we launch this initiative. We want to have more conversation with our community partners and exactly how this will be mobilized. We also need to make sure that we continue to have our presence in the community. I'm very grateful for the mayor and the city manager wanting to give us additional funding that we can provide that visible presence in our neighborhoods as we go through this violent time in our nation. In closing, again, I just want to stress that the community partnership is invaluable. We continue to ask that community members call Crime Stoppers when they see something, that they use our mobile app to make anonymous tips if needed, and that they know where their kids are. As school has started in some places, but there are a lot of young people still out on the street. Continue to encourage people to say something if they see something, and to continue to be as much a presence in their neighborhoods as they are able to, as they continue to adhere to the safety guidelines as we still continue through this pandemic. I'll answer any questions at the end of this, but I believe the city manager is going to have a few comments as well.
Good afternoon. I just want to spend a little bit of time giving you some information on the Special Assistant U.S. Attorney position that we established while I was the city solicitor. The U.S. Attorney's Office came to the city and asked if we could assign a prosecutor to their office to assist in the prosecution of gun crimes. Zach Kessler is here from the solicitor's office, and he is actually the third SALSA. The first SALSA was so successful that the U.S. Attorney's Office went ahead and hired her as a full-time assistant U.S. attorney. And the second one is now the Deputy Solicitor, Emily Warner. So Zach Kessler is actually our third SALSA. And the way that this operates is that Zach is actually embedded in the U.S. Attorney's Office. He works with ATF and the Cincinnati Police Department to coordinate prosecutions for federal gun charges, and has about a dozen cases now, has resolved several in the last few weeks. And this has been an incredibly successful partnership. We are looking forward to expanding that partnership and continuing with this successful model. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me just add on that last point. Over my time as mayor, there have been several major arrests that have been led by the U.S. Attorney's Office. I remember I was standing together with Ben Glassman a couple years ago. And this is in collaboration with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the ATF to bring down what are, mass illegal gun crimes, massive drug dealing operations, things of that nature. And without exception, when we make those arrests and bring them under federal charges, we always see a dramatic drop in crime to follow, which is why the city started paying out of our pocket for these assistant U.S. attorneys. So I just want to make that clear that they already have people that do this and work for the federal government. But the city of Cincinnati believes so strongly in this partnership with the U.S. Attorney's Office to bring federal prosecution against illegal gun crimes that we pay for Zach to work there full time. And we're going to be adding another one with the recommendation that we're making to City Council today. So with that, I'd like to open it up for questions for myself, for the chief, or the city manager. Well, I don't know, Paula, if you want to do a better job. Go ahead, yeah.
Good afternoon. So the city's SALSA focuses on gun crimes within the city, and that is the singular focus. And it is an additional person to help in that regard, to focus on those particular crimes. And so, as I said, Zach has a caseload of about a dozen right now. He's closed several in the past few weeks, so that has made a difference for us.
The other thing I'll say is that historically, the U.S. Attorney's Office covers, I think, everything south of Columbus, right? And so they do have resources. They focus on Cincinnati, but we're not their only focus. Whereas when we have someone like Zach and his predecessors, and Emily and Jackie and others, they're solely focused on Cincinnati cases because we're paying, because we're footing the bill for their work. And so that gives our police department a direct access inside the U.S. Attorney's Office that we know can't be distracted by something going on in Chillicothe or wherever.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Do you have a breakdown on the $1 million how much is going to go to this community group?
Yeah, we have, I think it's $100,000 for the SALSA. Is that how much? $100,000 for the U.S. Attorney position, $200,000, I believe, for the organizing position, and then, if my math is right, $700,000 for additional police overtime and visibility.
On that with the chief, when and how will people start noticing? What are people going to see on the street that going to start?
We hope to start that as quickly as possible. They should see a noticeable presence in officers on bicycles and officers on foot in specific hotspot areas. Particularly here, we're standing in one now. We've increased the presence here, but we hope to be able to expand the hours of operation around that and focus on some additional problem areas.
Are you having to pull in officers from different assignments and reassign them? Is that what you're going to do?
We've done some of that. We hope to be able to expand some of the shift hours and offer some volunteer overtime as well.
Chief, that sounds like a patch still to have the bodies there.
Say again, I'm sorry.
Sounds like a patch, short-term solution to have these bodies there. The funding is limited. What's the long-term answer? Is the long-term answer resources, or is there something else?
The long-term answer is investment in changing the social conditions of our city. That's the long-term answer. But right now, we have to stop the bleeding. When we know that violence is taking place in a specific location, we have to respond to that situation as quickly as possible. Then we need to invest in what changes communities, investing in education, investing in jobs, investing in housing. Those things are the type of things that make long-term change. So yeah, you're absolutely right. This is a short-term effort. Some of the things that we are trying to expand into some of the long-term effort are these community safety organizers. We want to help neighborhoods be able to organize and develop long-term solutions that make lasting change in their neighborhoods.
Chief, when we talk to people in the neighborhood as we did today, what they tell us is that the politicians and the police are not talking to the right people in the neighborhood, in Over the Line, in the West End. So as you go about forming the community safety organizers, do you feel that you're connected enough, and the police and the politicians are connected enough in the community to get the right people in those positions?
You know, that's my hope, and I believe I mentioned in my comments, I want to have some more conversations with our partners. I want to make sure that that is exactly what we're doing. Anyone that has a voice, we are talking to the community council presidents. I believe we have the Over the Rhine president standing with us here today. We invite voices, anyone that has an opinion, we invite them to share their opinions with us. Our liaison officers are available, they're out and about. I almost on a daily basis talk to different people throughout our city about some of these thoughts and ideas. So yes, we want to touch as many people as we can. I'm certainly open to hear their opinions. And again, I don't want this to be a police or a law enforcement effort. I continue to say I want the input, I want the involvement of the community at large.
Well, would they start charging the minors, the parents of the gun violence? If the minors start kill someone, would a parent get charged for it?
You know, I think that's depending on the circumstances. And I know that the prosecutors, they will look at that if that's the situation necessitates that.
That is the report from the mayor's court. Recommends third-party investigators when there's officer-involved shooting or in-custody death. Are you on board with an independent third-party examiner?
You know, I had a conversation with the state attorney general as recently as yesterday about that topic. We have some concerns. I think we do a very good job here, but I understand that that is a challenge for other municipalities. It's something that we are willing to work through and maybe even provide investigators to help in that situation. So I know there are a couple of ideas that the Attorney General has around doing something of that nature, and we're absolutely involved and in that conversation.
The report also points out some issues with arbitration panels. I quote it, it says, they frequently return serious and repeat offenders to duty, meaning officers that are involved in misconduct. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, let me, just to be clear, this report I stand behind, and I do agree with what you just said. I think it's a problem. But what I've asked today is that the police department be given the time to review and respond formally in writing in a measured and thoughtful way. And I promised the chief that he was not here to defend this report today. I want to give his department the time to read it, review it, 60 days or so to come back to us with a formal. I'm not saying you can't ask that question today or in 60 days. I'm just saying that I believe that. We've had multiple cases where the chief and others have tried to discipline officers for misbehavior or horrible behavior, and they've been returned by arbitration. So this report calls for reforming that provision, and I agree that if we can change it, we will. It requires, it's a problem. It requires, though, negotiation with the FOP, so we can't unilaterally change those things. But this report says we should try to change those things. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I helped write this report. Well, the contract's negotiated every 2 years. So ongoing, I've had over many years. I'm not we haven't had, there's a formal federal negotiation process, and it would be a violation not to do it within the timelines. I'm just expressing a political opinion that I'd like to see reforms to make it easier for Chief Isaac to issue discipline to officers. And that's what this report calls for. And I'm asking my lawyers, I'm asking the police department management to look at this report and make thoughtful responses to it.
It generically references states having laws that sort of limit discipline as well. Where are the biggest limits within Ohio?
Well, literally today, I was on a call with the governor on this very topic, and he has proposed legislation that I support that says if an officer is fired in one jurisdiction for misbehavior, violation of civil rights or whatever, that every other police department in the state would know that, and it wouldn't. And there are some places where that is not known. So an officer gets fired in one division, gets hired in another city altogether, and the new city didn't even know that the cop had been fired and have access to the discipline file. So this report recommends changing that. Governor DeWine has proposed specific legislation to change that, and I support that. And candidly, what Governor DeWine's legislation proposes is exactly what this report calls for in terms of, not the only thing, but one of the things that this report calls to in terms of changing state law.
Mayor,
Yeah.
two quick things. The $200,000 for the community organizers, is that going to be a single city position, or is that going to be multiple positions throughout the city? Second quick question, one of the policy recommendations in the report is a early warning system, which I don't need to go into what that is, but I don't even know if CPD has one of those in place or not.
We do.
I know that some
We
of
do.
them do. So,
Just on the second one first, because I'll let him answer the question about the organizers.
you guys do that?
We do have one, and it's a continuous work in progress. And when they have a time to respond in writing, they'll be able to explain how ours work.
Right. And we do envision that to be multiple positions, probably up to 4. Again, the details will come in the next couple of weeks, but yes, we do envision that to be multiple positions. All right.
Are you letting these murders happen in the community in order to get your budgets to continue to increase?
I don't see how that would be likely. For me to see someone lose their life over a budget, absolutely not. That's ridiculous. I would never do such a thing.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add real quick on the issue of is this enough and what's the long-term solution? $1 million isn't even close to enough to deal with the level of gun violence that we have, but it's all we can afford. And we can barely afford it at that with the economic headwinds we're facing. That's why we're paying off our short-term loan first. But we need more resources, not less, in the police department, in community organizing, with the U.S. Attorney. But the chief said it right. The long-term solution is investment in these communities, number one. But it's also an end to the pandemic. It's not a mystery that every major city in America is seeing gun violence increase when so many people are out of work and are cooped up, and there are multiple contributors to that. And so what we're hoping this $1 million does is help bridge past the pandemic. I don't think it'll cover anywhere near what we want to be that bridge, but it's at least something. And given the mass shooting that we have here, something is better than nothing. And what I'm hearing all across this community is that we need to go after the guns, with the U.S. Attorney's Office is going to help. We need to invest in community organizing, which the chief is leading, and we need to put more cops on the street. And this $1 million plan, which is nothing more than a bridge, but an important bridge, will save lives, will get gun criminals off the streets, and will help bridge us to an end of this pandemic.